why have I always tripped up? Well, you can understand the meaning of the planets and the traditional, oh, well, I got Saturn and Taurus and I never feel like I have enough money. And it's like, yes, but to be able to connect the dots and to see what that means in your life. And it always starts with the moon, because the moon rules the past. And if you understand what your moon is doing in your chart, it is a very good place to understand what baggage you brought with you into this lifetime. You know, the moon, of all of the things that we use in astrology, the moon makes a circle around the earth. And if you've been involved in the Western magical tradition, you know, a circle creates a boundary. It creates a barrier. And the moon, Mother Moon, creates a circle, allowing certain things in and other things to not come in. And that allowance, the Mother Moon allowing certain things to come in, bringing certain things from our past. I read certain astrology books that comment on the moon as it's like a bad, it's not a spiritual planet or something. Everything is spiritual. There isn't anything that's not spiritual. Everything is God. Everything is the one. And everybody has a role to play. Regardless of whether you like somebody or you don't like them, if they're a political leader and you despise them, it's good to remember that this person has a job to do, even if you think it's awful. They have a job to do, and they had a lot of karma with a lot of people. Otherwise, they wouldn't be famous. Otherwise, they wouldn't have the connectivity. And it's the same with any public figure. And remember, the moon rules the public. But for us, and I'll just be brief with this, the moon often shows your connection with your spiritual striving from past incarnations, whether there was conflict or whether there was harmony, whether you were progressing, whether you were comfortable, or whether you were somehow bogged down in something, whether it was repetitive, it was sort of like, oh, I got to do this again, or whether it was like, wow, this is so exciting. And, you know, it's like when Marcia Moore and I were doing past life regression, she says, if I regress some, get one more, you know, peasant from Southern Africa again in past lives, it's just like they go through a very boring life. Of course, she was a Gemini and she bored easily, but but my point is that what's important is to be able to extract from all of your past the things that are important. And it is a major lesson. I want to point out one thing that I think is, you know, it's kind of kicked around and there's a lot of literature written on it. It's about retrograde planets. You know, a lot of times people talk about, you know, retrograde planets they show you things, you know, that you're having to repeat from the past or something that you've perfected. It's not quite that simple. Retrograde planets always are moving slower than they are, and they are moving in a direction that is against the current of where the sun is going, which later on when we talk about Dharma, this can be important. But I wanted to share with you now. If you look at the charts of famous people, oh, you know, oh God, let me see. I'm gonna see if I can do the screen sharing. Hold on. It's good to get this taken care of now because there's so many charts that I wanted to show you. Anyway, so many people that you would think of as like, oh, they must have been a musician in their past life. And you look at the charts of Johann Sebastian Bach, Mozart, Elton John, who were all people who not were just musicians, but they could hear a piece of music and go back and play it instantly, even as children. Now, where's that skill come from? Wouldn't you assume that that meant that they had, well, all of them, their Venus is direct. None of them have retrograde Venuses. Well, Venus rules music. That, you know, we can substantiate, but I'm pointing out, you know, that it isn't quite as simple as we might have wanted it to be. I got to see if I can get this. Oh boy. I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble with the logistics on my screen here. I'm just trying to get rid of this here. Can you do that for me? I have to get the charts that are behind here.
Yeah, you can just move it.
That's what I wanted. Thank you very much.
But they can't see it unless you share.
Okay, I'm gonna, yeah, I know. Okay, here is a chart. Maybe I'll get this out of here. I need to go to screen share, I know. Just don't go away. Let me, where do I get, I gotta get back to the screen.
Well, it's this one. So.
Okay, I gotta go here.
And then make it bigger.
Okay. Thank you. Right. Share.
I want to see if it does that same thing. Then pick it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, it's got the green all the way around now, so it's not going to cut off. That's good.
Uh-huh.
I was looking up how to fix that.
Okay, yeah. Okay. So this is a chart of a Catholic priest named John Deere. He has Mercury and Jupiter in harmonious signs, but Mercury is in square to Neptune, and he has Venus and Mars conjunct in Virgo. Why this is important is that he has written like 30 books and lots of articles. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize twice by Desmond Tutu and one other person whose name escapes me at the moment. But he's been a peace activist, nonviolent activist. And, you know, with the sun conjunct Uranus, this, by the way, the birth time is, I don't know the exact birth time. I've done my due diligence to try to find out, but the aspects are the same. And his chart does describe, you know, with Saturn retrograde, Mercury retrograde, and Venus retrograde, perfectly describes his pattern of being a priest and standing up for the underdog all through his pastorate. There were some of you might have participated a few years back. I did a week study. You know, once a week we met and studied his book, They Will Inherit the Earth. Anybody that was in getting my newsletter at the time could join it. Now I got to stop this here. Okay, so anyway, my point is that if you look at the chart of General Patton, he was somebody who has a past life memory of being a soldier, and he was a pretty good one. He was the only soldier. He was the only general that the Nazi generals had a dossier on. They thought he was the big kahuna. He was definitely, you know, somebody who was. Let me see if I can share that. I think his chart is fascinating, and I do have an exact time for him. Okay, what do we do? Oh, man. Okay. Okay, here's his chart, and you can see he has Mars at 1 degree of Virgo. Now, you wouldn't think of Virgo as being particularly Martian, but he had the north node of the moon in Virgo, Jupiter conjunct the north node of the moon, and Neptune trining from the 12th house. He was certainly a master general. He had Mars square Pluto, too, of course, and it was at the base of the Mars was at the base of a T square with Mercury and Pluto. He was always in the mix with people. Always, what would you say? He had difficulties with superiors all through his life, but was considered to be an excellent general. So Venus is, as I was saying about Venus retrograde, Dean Rudyard said, if a retrograde planet can tell us anything, Venus has to be the one, because Venus is retrograde a shorter amount of time than any planet that can be retrograde. Venus is retrograde 40 days every 2 years. And my own research on Rudyard's hypothesis is that people with Venus retrograde express their love nature differently. It goes against the grain of what is acceptable, what people ordinarily do. Well, who are two consummate examples of retrograde Venus? Meher Baba, my spiritual master, and Adolf Hitler. It's like, okay, these are like archetypes for going against the grain of what most people do with their romantic impulses or their sexuality. So I'm saying that you can actually discover a lot about your chart, about other people's charts through deciphering the retrograde planets, but you can't jump to conclusions that this necessarily points to some planetary rulership being a dominant precursor to the actions that they're taking in this lifetime via career or personality. You have to go a little deeper and ferret out what it actually meant for people. As the great astrologer, contemporary of ours, Lee Lehman, pointed out to me, you should never buy a car when Mars is retrograde. Mars is retrograde every year, but Mars rules combustion, and you don't want a car with a bad combustion. So, and I mean, there are a number of things that you can sort of extract from the transits that go on, and there are things that you can figure out about an individual, yours or somebody else's, when you're looking at the chart. But I'm just putting it out to you. You have to be careful. It's like you have to try and see it in a larger context. Now, there's also, I wanted to talk a little bit about the meaning of the signs of the zodiac, because every degree of the zodiac has a meaning. 1 degree Mars is different than 2 degrees. It's different than 3 degrees. It's different in Libra than it is in Gemini. It's different in Capricorn than it is in Cancer. But what you can extract, and what's been written about by a number of modern astrologers, people that I respect, is that the exact degree that a planet is within a sign will tell you something about what that planetary energy is doing at this moment in life. 0 degrees means they're starting something out. If you're at 0 degrees of a sign, and the planet is at 0 degrees of sign, the person is taking on something new regarding the nature of that sign. If it's at the 29th degree, it's ending something. Now, I know everybody here knows Georgia Stathis. Last Monday, she gave an incredibly beautiful talk on the 29th degree of a sign. And I think it's available, you know, there were 100 people on the talk, and I was talking to her after it was over and says, you know, I think the software just wouldn't let any more people in, but it was extremely popular. She did it as a fundraiser for the Alexandria Project, which is, you know, her baby. She supported it to the tune of, I don't know, maybe $50,000 a year for years now. And you know, these fundraisers are very important because they're preserving the astrological knowledge from the past. And you know, people say, oh yeah, I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of William Lilly's books, or, you know, like a Vedius Valence and stuff. It's like, yeah, but, you know, Aunt Tallulah, who was doing tea leaf readings, sometimes came up with something brilliant. It was mimeographed, and you have it in your closet, and you look and say, wow, nobody's ever talked about this. And I could give you examples ad nauseum on this. So I will. Okay. That's it. Well, you know, there's a woman named Shirley Lyons Myers, and she lives in Ohio, and she wrote a book that was published by some probably not in business publishing company anymore. But she wrote a book called Elemental Voids. Well, she talked about what it meant when you have no planets in a sign. Well, if you, like me, grew up on Rudyard and Mark Edmund Jones, they described, if you have, you will automatically be connected to people who have a lot of whatever you're missing. And I thought, well, you know, I can see Mark Edmund Jones was a Libra, so I can see him coming up with that idea, you know, and but Rudyard was an Aries, and that didn't make any sense, you know. So, but Shirley Lyons Myers had this idea, and I read her book, and I went nuts. I thought, this is brilliant. When you have an empty trine, she calls it an empty trine, you know, no fire in your chart, it doesn't mean you have no energy. It means that you may appear to have no energy, but you have no issues karmically with that element in this lifetime. And so you're not working in that arena. And if you find people with no Leo, Aries, or Sagittarius in their chart, they're the person who gets there in the morning when you open shop, and at the end of the day, they're still there, walking along, doing what they need to do, but they never run out of energy because they're not learning any lessons connected with it. You know, Mayor Baba, my spiritual master, had no fire in his chart. Well, okay, but nobody could keep up with him. You know, when he was out for a walk or whatever, it's like people had to like really hustle. So my point is, in the no earth, there's people that's like, they may be rich or poor, but they don't have issues connected with they don't have issues connected with the earth plane in that way in this lifetime. And it's the same with people with no air in their. One of my children, what's her name? Good old what's her name? Never forget my kids, right? Well, I can't, you know, I spent time with all of them as they're going. I have 5 kids and spent time with all of them going through class. And she had trouble with doing math that, you know, she was getting to like calculus and stuff like that. I don't know how, I didn't have any classes beyond algebra and geometry, you know. So I'm sitting with her, and you know, I have Saturn, my karma, in Virgo, which is most particular, wants to get it exactly right. And so I'm describing to her, how do you go and get, you know, it's like, and she's there, and she says, I don't know. And so I've talked for about 15 minutes about how to solve a problem. And she hasn't written down anything. And she says, well, is the answer 42? And I said, yeah. How did you get that? She says, well, I don't know. It's just, it seemed seem like the right, and she has no air in her chart. She has no intermediate process. There is no, yeah, it's the thing. I've seen this time after time with people who are, they just go straight to the bottom line. Whatever it is, that abstract process is not where they're going through learning in this lifetime. And it's same with people who are low, have no water in their chart. They look like they lack empathy, but something goes wrong and they're right there holding the person's hand and crying and stuff. It's like it's in there, but they're not going through the lessons of the lifetime. So somebody would say to me, well, this is all well and good, Bob, and planets at the 15th degree of a sign, it's a balance point, and the beginning is 0 degrees. And we could talk, we could spend a whole day talking about this. It would be great. But the point is, suppose you're a Vedic astrologer, you use a different zodiac. And some of you, it's, I know it's a friend of all of our, Glenn Perry, who's like, he's over the top. He I love Glenn. He stood up at an Indian conference that he'd been invited to and told them they were all wrong for using. He says, I've got proof that, and he wrote articles ad nauseum about the 2 zodiac problem. And then God bless him, the researcher that lives in San Diego, Kenneth Miller, wrote an article called The 3 Zodiac Problems. And it was a wonderful, without being mean-spirited, it was a wonderful rebuff. He says, there isn't just 2 zodiacs, there's also the zodiac of constellations. And he gave wonderful examples. And I said, Ken, this is brilliant. So give me a copy of that article so I don't have to save the magazine. He did. It's like, but my point is that I'm rooted in Western astrology. I studied Vedic astrology, and I'd be stupid to say that it doesn't work. Like tell people that 5,000 years of their history is wrong. It's like, okay, one short, but sideline. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. Yes. They're not working in that. Yes, the what? Ma'am, what's your name? What? Garrett? Tara. I'm sorry, my hearing is impaired.
I wanted to ask, is it the same as intercepted?
That's a very good question. Tara is asking the question about having no planets in an element. And is it similar to an interception? And to tell you the truth, I never thought about it that way before. But the point is, if you have a planet in an intercepted sign, it will have to express itself through the planet that rules the sign on the house cusp until that is worked out. Now, Joan McEvers, a handful of people have written books on intercepted signs, and they're all good. But I'm telling you, that's my takeaway on it. The other thing is that the most important thing for having no planets in an element is that element expresses itself in a different way, but it's there. And it's always there as a resource that the person has to draw on when they need it. And intercepted signs don't quite work that way, but they do share one thing in common, is they're invisible. An intercepted sign is terribly difficult to see how it's manifesting in a person's life because it's controlled by other things. It's like I'm having dinner with a husband and wife, and I asked the woman, we're in a Mexican restaurant. Do you think that that you eat tacos? They're pretty good. And without missing a beat, she turns to her husband and says, "Do we like tacos?" It's, it's, it's like, you're kidding. You didn't really do that. But it's like, that's like an intercepted sign. It's like the planet in an intercepted sign does not know what it's being directed by something else.
I'm sorry, what did she have?
She had her life intercepted. What? Yeah, I didn't. I she wasn't. She actually was a client of mine. Now that you mention it, and she did have some but it's complicated. You know, it's like it's like, what did Blanche Dubois have that's an intercepted planet? You know, it's like, anyhow. So the signs of the zodiac yes, ma'am.
So someone has one sign in an element, or one planet in an element.
That's different.
Okay, every time it's a singleton.
A singleton, that's the tail wagging the dog. That becomes massively important in a person.
I've been told it's very powerful and very charged.
Well, yeah, the question's been asked, what about one planet in an element? I'll just make this very rapidly. I call it the tail wagging the dog. I don't think that the planet is necessarily powerful, like an aching tooth is powerful in one sense. You know, it gets your attention. You cannot ignore a singleton, but it also does not function like a fulfillment, like somebody who has 4 planets in an element. If you have 2 in an element, this is, I think, very key. If you have 2 planets in an element, it functions like a deficit in your thinking. It's like, I have 2 planets in Earth. I personally have 1 planet in Earth. So I'm relating to this woman here. It's like, yes, it does. It's like, it's my aching tooth. It's like, it gets my attention. That's why I'm always on it. People with 2 planets, and a girlfriend of mine had 2 planets in air. And Swami Kriyananda told her, it's always like you feel like you don't achieve enough. You feel like you're not as smart as everybody else. You always are striving to prove. But the truth of the matter is, in the long run, you're going to end up with more wallpaper proving that you get all these degrees, proving how smart you are, because you never feel like it is secure. Somebody with 2 planets on Earth, they always feel like everybody else is more practical. It's because there's 10 planetary bodies that we take into account. I take into account, my system does. And if they were split evenly, you would have 2.5 planets in every element, but you can't. So you either have a little less or a little more than what would be the average. Again, and there's something different. You're all raising good questions, and I'm loving it. And I wanted to just say, I wanted to talk a little bit about the ascendant, because I think that the ascendant is massively important to understand where persons come from and where they're going. Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry to back up.
That's
I
okay.
was intrigued by your how many planets in one sign. And could you just clarify how you would differentiate if I have 1 planet in this sign versus I have 4 planets in this sign?
Okay, one planet, not in a sign, but in an element, like Earth. Yeah, that's okay. I call a singleton a tail wagging the dog. It's like it gets outsized permission to be annoying until you address it. And it's like, oh, I don't deal with that. Well, yeah, you do. You just don't know that you do. And having 4 planets in a sign, it's like, I got it all taken care of. It's like, how many people have you known with 4 planets in air that are fucking lazy? It's like they always feel like they got it all taken care of. It's like everything's fine. Or somebody who's like 4 planets on Earth, and it's like they've always got their nose to the grindstone, and they're always thinking, like a chipmunk gathering chestnuts. And it's like where we end up with a lot of planets, 4 or more, there's that great feeling of abundance. Somebody with 4 or 5 planets in fire, it's like, oh, are we ready to go? Let's do it. It's like, oh, okay. It's like, well, let me see. I prepared breakfast and I've gone for a jog, and now I'm going to take some notes before I balance my checkbook and go to work. It's like the energy is just flying all over the place. And of course, with all of us, I'm putting it in a humorous vein, but each of us has to learn to deal with our abundance and with our inadequacies. And people, it's like Pluto is 1, Neptune is 1, the sun is 1, the moon is 1. They're each place notes, like piano notes on a keyboard. And when other people talk about, well, you give 3 points to the sun and 1 point to Pluto and stuff, it's like, I understand the thinking, but I'm a simple-minded guy. I found what works for me, and to just keep it simple is best. That works for me. So I'm going to talk about the ascendant, if that's okay with everybody here. Your ascendant is formed physically. Your physical body is formed by the consolidated mold of all of the mental impressions that you've gathered going through creation. So you end up with a body that perfectly mirrors what it is that you are going to present to the world and what it is that you need to be doing in that lifetime. And I'm not going to belabor it, but just to mention a few things. If you meet somebody and they have a spirit that comes straight out, but there's a backstory that you don't see, that will almost inevitably be a planet that is conjunct the ascendant from the 12th house. I have a really good prime example. I wish I could figure out how to do this screen sharing a little bit better, but I'll see what I can do here. Hey, you know, when I was writing the chapter of my book on Mercury, I was looking for quotes, examples at the beginning. And I was thinking, wow, what a great example. Rene Descartes. What was he famous for? The expression, I think, therefore I am. So what was Rene Descartes? Yeah. So Rene Descartes is what? What sign is Rene Descartes? Yeah. Doesn't that make sense? Look at how many planets he has in Aries, you know? So, yeah, I got it. Yeah. Anyway, I wanted to show you a different chart. And so here is the chart of Errol Flynn. Now, Errol Flynn was, he played Robin Hood, he played swashbucklers. He was always this dashing hero with the sword and out saving the world, and charming. He had Aries rising, right? But he had a medical problem and problem with his back and all kinds of physical ailments that kept him out of the military. And he tried to volunteer, but was always rejected. I thought that was kind of fascinating. Now, okay, mister. Stop sharing, okay. All righty. So, planets to the ascendant. Squares are always something that shows obstacles to relating, not just to people, but the circumstances in your environment. Trines and sextiles are something that always ends up giving you a boost in whatever is the indicator. I did, there was a study that was done, I looked it up, where there were people who were like super rich, and all of them had a trine or a sextile from Uranus to the ascendant. And it was like, oh, that the ability to go against the grain, which is Uranus, works out in the personal life in a way that gives you some edge. Now, I could talk about Errol Flynn's chart, but I think we'll move on. I wanted to talk a little bit about the moon's nodes, which, you know, there's a lot of ink spilled over the moon's nodes. And I want to go on record as saying, I have a short bibliography, 2, 6, 10 books that I read and recommend. And if you are very interested in it, you can write me and I can email it to you. I remember, you know, Zip Dobbin is often overlooked a lot, but the woman was brilliant. And she, of course, being a Taurus, would, you know, wanted to consolidate everything a lot. And so she said the moon's nodes are like the moon, which is true. The moon is the past, and the moon's nodes are pointing to the past and the future. And if you look at planetary nodes, like the planetary node for Neptune, the 10 degrees of Leo, it acts like Neptune. If you look at the, you know, the planetary node of Saturn, 21 degrees of Capricorn, it acts like Saturn. It's in a very narrow range. So it made sense to me that the nodes would be like the moon itself. But it is also true, as Rudyard would always point out, the south node is your past and the north node is your future. I think that if you read a lot of books on if you're going to read one book on the node, you should always read Yesterday's Sky by Stephen Forrest, which is, I think, is by far the best that I've read. And if anybody's found something better, let me know. If you're in for a long read, Jan Spiller's book, Astrology for the Soul, is great. It's like when you're reading it, you feel like a cow chewing its cud. You know, it's like, oh, okay, go on and on. But the information is all good. The point is, and why it's important to us, is your south node shows you something that is the past, and it is something that you have to be able to relinquish, because there's always a craving connected with the south node of the moon, but it never satisfies. You're never fulfilled through it. Where the north node is always opening you up to something new and gives you a sense of fulfillment. The thing is, the south node of the moon is something you really know how to do. You got that down. You can nail that sucker flat. But the north node of the moon is like, gee, I don't know that I can do that. But when you start doing it, you find out you're actually very good at it. It's like it opens, and it is a very important part of what forms what the Buddhists and the Hindus refer to as your Dharma in life. There's more to Dharma than that, than the nodes, but I wanted to start there because I feel that you know, it is worth looking into. If you get Melanie Reinhardt's book, Incarnations. She has a section on the nodes that also makes perfect sense and takes a slightly different direction, because she is advising you have to balance the nodes. You have to get to, harmony between them. But I'm of the school of thought, and it's been verified for me by my own work, that the South Node does show something from the past. Probably the smartest person I've known in Western astrology on the nodes is Michael Luton. And if you had the good fortune of being in one of his weekend workshops, it was incredible. And I've been through those tapes many times and taken notes. And Michael, it was his karma, didn't write a lot that made it into print in book form. There's some, but he never got his master work, I felt, out on the nodes. In 2003, in Anaheim, California, I was in a one-day workshop with him where it was truncated from his weekend workshop, but he talked about the nodes, and I wanted to see if I've got some thoughts of his. He said that the South Node is infantile repetitive behavior, primitive instinctive need, which is, again, it's a lunar thing. And there's a feeling of security with the South Node, but you never do actually feel secure. It's never final and settled. Whereas the North Node is a point. It shows us where our future lies. And to be able to look at that and to be able to focus on what your North Node is showing is a very, very important aspect of this. And we'll talk a little bit more about this. The key thing is that, yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to share a memory
Oh.
about Luton and the South Node.
Okay, yes.
So he talks about the South Node, and he said, it's kind of our addiction. It's very back to it. It's standing on the street, and
I have all this work to do.
Cadillac comes by, and the window rolls down, and somebody says, downtown.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. He did say that.
Oh.
That was, for those of you who didn't hear, it's Michael Luton's story. He says, the South Node of the moon is like you're standing on a street, like waiting for the bus, and a big Cadillac pulls up next to you, and the guy rolls the window down and says, hey, you want to go for a ride downtown? And it's like, oh, okay. He says, he had a lot of analogies like that. A South Node of the moon is like, it's a hot summer's day, and you have a glass of ice cubes, and you take a Coca-Cola and you pour it over the ice cubes, and it's the effervescence. And it's like that feeling. And he says, and the North Node, it's a Diet Coke and a Metrocal wafer. It's like,
Say it again.
The North Node is like a Diet Coke and a Metrocal wafer. It's like, oh, okay, this is good for me. But Michael Luton was a genius, and his work on the nodes was, and it would be like, and I say, well, where does this come from? He said, oh, just watch the nodes and study them and you'll get it. I'm thinking, yeah, you get it, but it doesn't come so easily for everybody.
And for the people in the room, the reason why we're all talking about this, this wonderful space that Michael was
We had a wonderful memorial service for him, and it was I think Ray Merriman organized it and put it together, and it was heartfelt and wonderful. And Arlen Weiss, who was a very close friend, wrote an article about him, and she spoke, but she didn't have this. They didn't give her the space at the memorial service to tell a lot of the things, because he did so many things that were just very, very unique. So there is that, and I just wanted to share that. Now I want to talk about Dharma, because I was mentioning that, people talk about Dharma, and they connect it with the North Node, and they connect karma with the South Node. And yeah, kind of, but it doesn't totally work that way. The South Node is a force all on its own, and the North Node is a force all on its own. But the North Node is what you, in that sense, should be doing, concentrating on the North Node. Now, let me see if I can. There you go. Okay, thank you. So here's the triangle, the fire triangle, which is the center of the self. The Sun, Mars, and Jupiter. And the Sun is the core of the individual identity. Jupiter is our higher mind, our guru, our spiritual master. And Mars is the initial impulse. So if you look at the zodiac, we get, why is Mars important? Well, if you remember, Mars is your reason for incarnating. You wanted something. If you didn't want anything, you wouldn't be here. It's like, okay, so the desire is there. It brings us into incarnation. The Sun, the core of our identity, our individual self. And Jupiter, the king of the gods. Indra, the Thor. What does you, again, all of these are chapters of the book on their own. But Jupiter is your organizing principle. It is the thing that it's the big bureaucrat. It's the administrator. It pulls all of the pieces together and makes sense out of it. He gives orders. Now, why do people, I found this to be fascinating. Michel Guaquelin did a few things that were, he worked his ass off, but he did a few things that were really miraculous. He studied, 502 top Nazis, the top ranking Nazis, to look to see what planet deviated in the circle. The only planet that had any deviation was Jupiter. What is Jupiter for the Nazis? It was a false god. It was that they were taking Hitler as God Almighty. In 1942, the people of Germany collectively did not pray to God for Hitler. They prayed to Hitler. They had taken him as their personal deity. And when you meet somebody who's a narcissist and completely over the top and believes that they're beyond the rules, you think, oh, well, that's Sun, that's Leo. It's Jupiter. It's the person has taken Jupiter, what would we say, out of context.
So what was the deviation in Jupiter, those Nazis?
Oh, it just showed up as,
Different kinds of
well, it has to do, the question is what showed up in the top Nazis as deviation. I'm going to try to remember the source here. It is Planets in Human Behavior by Michel Guaquelin. He wrote so many books, but that's the one that this is in. He had a method of research where he would look at the 24-hour revolution of the planets, and he'd get all of the people's charts, and just basically looking at their the position of planets and the 24-hour revolution of the Earth on its own axis, and the distribution. And there would be 4 points, one near the midheaven, one near the nadir, one near the ascendant, and one near the descendant, where they would spike if that planet was in deviation, like the moon for writers. And the most famous research was his research on athletes, which is the Mars study, showing how Mars deviated dramatically from what you would call a standard distribution in the charts of famous athletes. Anyway, so I just mentioned this, that when you're looking at Mars, the Sun, and Jupiter in a horoscope, that in addition to the nodes describes the person's dharma, what they have, as you could call it, a life mission or a purpose. And it also you can look at the fire sign themselves and how they integrate with this. Anyway, it's a big step. I'm going to try and do the rest of this talk without having to show you a lot of charts, because frankly, I get so tied up in the great difficulties with the technical stuff here. And if I am here, just mark my word, if I'm here doing a workshop ever again, I will have this technical stuff worked out before I get here. I've been doing it on the fly. My laptop died, and it had to be replaced. Either that or just come without a laptop. And so this one is, like a week old.
Bob, you're in an understanding group of people. It's okay.
I named my computer generated report is called Indra, and people like it. It's at one point, it was the largest selling chart interpretation program in the country. I wrote it. I'm a slow writer. This book took 20 years. This is literally the truth. I was so upset that I didn't have something in print that I could give analytic information to people, about their chart. Here's what Mars in the first house means. Here's what Jupiter in the third house means. And I didn't have something that could just assemble all of that, so I didn't have to spend any time talking to a client about stuff that they could just read. But the synthesis, you have to have an astrologer to synthesize it, but it is very helpful for people to have this. And this is literally, and those of you who know me for a long time, you know that it wasn't just this book. I am a slow writer. I was in India in 1987, and it suddenly hit me that I should write a chart interpretation program, because there isn't one. Not one that I would want to mention or share with people. Forgive me, they were stupid. I was like, I thought there could be, and I was on the way to the airport, and it hit me. The program should be called Indra. And I got on a plane, and I asked the stewardess. This was back in the day when frequent flyer points meant something, because I traveled all the time, for work. I was seeing clients all over the country. I had always had, a ton of frequent flyer points. So I had first class tickets for, can you believe this, 100,000 frequent flyer miles. Like, you can't fly to Detroit for that anymore in coach. It's like, but I'm on the plane, and I'm talking to the stewardess. I says, do you have any stationery or writing paper? She said, yeah. I says, oh, bring me a big stack of it. Do you have a pen? She says, yeah. I literally wrote the program on the trip back to India. I've never written anything as fast before or since. I was like a machine. I was going from one line to the next as fast as I could move. And I got home and I called David Cochran up, who was, I was, I went to Cosmic. David and I knew each other before Cosmic Patterns. We met in the 15th of March in 1980. I was customer number one in Cosmic Patterns when they first opened. And I said, I want to write, I've got this program. He says, well, I've written this architecture. It's called Wizard. It's a programming language. And I says, send it to me. I'll write the program myself. So I wrote all the code for it, and as well as the text. And a year later, it was on the market as a thing. But Indra, the key is Indra is the big kahuna. It's like millions of angels and nature spirits and planetary deities report to him. He holds the whole thing together in the cosmic sense. Now, you have to understand every planet is a deity, and you experience that planet inwardly, but it's also present in the environment. There's a triangle between the planet, your inner experience, and the external environment. And every planet has a different role to play. Mars was the Big Bang. It's the impulse. Mercury made duality. It split things into subject and object. And Jupiter's role, king of the gods, created this circle of 12 signs of the zodiac. So every year Jupiter is in one sign of the zodiac. And Jupiter is the planet of decorum. He tells you how things are supposed to be. You talk to somebody with Mercury in Sagittarius and you ask them, about something in their life. They don't tell you how it is. They tell you how it's supposed to be. This is how things are done. And that's the Jupiter impulse. It's like he holds it all together. And it's like, yeah, of course he's optimistic and abundant, and he's a philanderer. He's multiplying. He's busy, like building things. It's like, okay, pride is the big difficulty, and pride comes before the fall. And what is the fall? Is Saturn. Saturn is the planet of limits. Remember, Saturn was Jupiter's father. Saturn is Jupiter's father. And
for my many Valentines.
Remember, Saturn's wife comes to Saturn. Saturn was eating his children as fast as they were born. And when his mother took, and remember, Jupiter is in its exaltation in Cancer, the sign of the mother. So the mother is protecting Jupiter, and Saturn comes and says, hey, where's your child? Well, what does she do? She gives Saturn a stone and says, this is your child. So that the axiom is you have to give Saturn a stone, meaning that your Saturn has to be fulfilled no matter how tricky you get. And it is important to remember that the karma is there. It gets put in motion and it is going to be resolved. But just like Saturn, of course, is paranoid. Why? Because Saturn overthrew his father. What was his father? Saturn overthrew Uranus. Well, what is Uranus? Uranus is infinite.
Nancy Reagan, just say
but
no.
how can creation happen in infinity? It can't. So what is Saturn? Saturn is limitation. And so Saturn rules sound and time. Jupiter rules light and space. And the two of them together create what is referred to as Indra's net, net of illusion. And, it is true that every soul, Indra is not,
automatically updated.
It's a role, it's a station.
For 2 days.
Unlike the other planetary deities, Jupiter went through evolution. He was a human being, and he gets this job, and he can keep it for 4 regress cycles, but then he has to take life back on Earth to complete his mission. But the point is that Jupiter is this all-confident entity, and he gives us that all-confident feeling in ourselves, but untethered, it always leads to problems. Pride, overindulgence, when we go beyond it. As the Buddha said, you give a man a mountain of gold, you multiply it twice, and he still doesn't have enough. It's like Mary Trump writing the book Too Much But Never Enough. It's like you can't fulfill. You're with a partner who's gambling, and they're going double or nothing, and you keep saying, "Come on, Harry, let's leave. We're a winner. You got $2,000. Let's get out of here." And it's like, no, I'm going to go double or nothing again. Well, you go double or nothing long enough, you'll always lose. That's the nature of things. There is a limitation beyond our personality that always comes in to harness us and to just be complete. So Saturn castrates Uranus, throws his genitals into the ocean, and Venus rises on the half shell out of the ocean. Well, Venus is love, beauty, truth, symmetry. Well, what's that about? Venus is the reminder that we're all one, that it's the unity, it's the beauty, it's the thing. And when people become spiritually inclined, it's not usually because they sat down and they added it up and they got a formula and says, "Oh, God must exist. Let me go find him." It's that they get that whiff, they get that vision, they see something. It's like, wait, this goes beyond what I normally experience. This is something divine. And Venus is that symbol of divine love present within creation, not infinite. And most people experience their Venus as a romantic love, or as greed. It's like, oh, give me some more money. Venus rules money. Well, what's money? You could have $1 billion in a bag and you're alone on a desert island. It doesn't do you any good. Why is that? Because money is an abstraction. It's an agreed upon value amongst people. And what does Venus rule? Taurus, money. Libra, relationships. So if you come to me and you say, oh, I want to buy a copy of your book. I'm saying, well, do you have the money? And you say, yeah, here's $36. And I look at it and say, well, this is Confederate currency. We don't actually take that. And you also, what do you mean? Well, if it's not agreed upon, it doesn't exist as a reality. The paper might, the coins might, the physicality is there, but they have to be, the Taurus has to be presented on a bigger screen, the Libra sign, in order to have any meaning in society. What does Venus mean for the astrologer? Well, if you're sitting with a chart and you're saying, well, I see you have Mars and Taurus, that means you're stubborn and you have a hard time getting out. And I see that you have the Sun in Gemini, and it means that you're interested in a lot of things. It's like, well, you go through the reading and it doesn't have much significance for the person that you're talking to because you're not putting it together. And Venus is the ability to look at a chart and to see the whole thing at once. It's the synthesizing agent, and that's Venus's gift. And the other gift is Venus allows you to communicate it to the person that you're talking to, not just in words, but a feeling of real connection. What's Venus is in its exaltation in Pisces. Well, what is Pisces? Is a Pisces is a sign of we're all connected. We're all one. I made a judgment years ago, and I've never been wrong on this to my knowledge. If somebody comes to me and they want me to do their chart, I don't do it if I don't feel love for them. Not because I'm a snob about it, but because I'm realizing I'm not going to do them any favor unless I'm actually able to feel what it's like to be in them, which is through Venus. So we have the analytic side, Mercury, where you have a computer generated report, which is essential. You got to have the analytic information, but you have to be able to put it together to be able to, as Zip Dobbins saying, be able to see the person in the horoscope. So anyway, you get me off on these side transits because they're all interesting, and but we were talking about the nodes of the moon. I think we were anyway, and I wanted to mention that you get a lot of information. One of the things that Michael Luton talked about with the nodes, it's true that the nodes are going to be present in every major relationship. Every major relationship you have, the nodes will somehow show up. It doesn't mean that you have the north node of the moon in Gemini and that you're going to marry a Gemini. It doesn't. I mean, again, there's no one-to-one correlations in astrology, and we often get caught in our own simple-minded reductions. But the truth of the matter is, they're still always there, and it's the kind of thing where you see, all right, there's something going on that's good for all of us when we're connecting with somebody who has a prominent node configuration in our chart. Now, here's the mystery, if you will, of karma. If you go to a restaurant, you have karma with everybody sitting in the restaurant. Now, it's not major karma, maybe, but there is some karma that brought you and whoever else is there to the same place at the same time. So the karma is infinite, apparently. Maya goes on generating more and more stuff for us to be involved with. So unscrambling it, we have to establish some kind of hierarchy of what's important. The most important relationship that we have karmically is a relationship between the spiritual master and the disciple. The guru-disciple relationship trumps everything else. The second, and this is a zinger, but it's true, the second highest karma that you have is with your marriage partner. So if you're married to somebody, even you think, oh, I was only married for a short period of time, and I don't see that guy anymore, and it's like, we were okay. Even in the dregs of it, the karma is deepest between you and somebody that you took that vow with, and it trumps all the other things. Well, I was married 7 times. Well, yeah, those people you all had this kind of deeper karma with. And it doesn't have to do with whether you like it, whether you feel that this was my soulmate, any more than it means, I'm having a breakup with my spiritual teacher. Okay, you had the karma to be with somebody who was totally full of shit and promoted themselves as your spiritual teacher. Okay, you had karma with that person. And, when it's done, to be able to go on with no animosity, it's just like, okay, that was a mistake, and let it go. That is a brilliant thing because you are free. And Jupiter, of course, is our wisdom, our higher consciousness. And your spiritual master and your higher consciousness are the same thing. It's just, it is easier when you see it manifested externally in a person. And Mercury is our our reasoning. It's our ability to gather information from the environment, to spin it all together and to come out with something. You know, Rene Descartes, which I was showing you his chart before, all this Aries in it. Well, you know, he developed an argument called the ontological argument. it was somebody was a way too much time thinking, developed an argument for the existence of God. And there was in the Middle Ages, there was a philosopher, monk called Saint Anselm, who came up with the same argument. And Charles Hartshorne in the 70s here in the United States put it together. And it's an argument, strictly logical argument for the existence of God. And I'll give you in a nutshell. It boils down to, think of, and this is 100 pages condensed to a paragraph. If God is an all-perfect being, and you postulate all these attributes to him, if he doesn't exist, that would be something he would be missing. So he has to exist, otherwise he wouldn't be perfect. That is the summation of the argument. And I was a philosophy major in graduate school, and I was talking to a Jewish professor who was an atheist, and I was teaching philosophy. He was taking philosophy of religion from him, and I said, "Well, what do you think?" And he says, "Oh yeah, the argument works, but he proves that God exists. He just doesn't prove that God isn't anything." It's like, oh, okay. It's like you can get so tied up in your head, but on the spiritual path, we're always led initially by Venus. You know, we are inspired because we feel love. And then we can become more animated. Mars tells us, okay, I desire that. And I desire that more than this. It's like, I was talking to this woman, and she says, I'm afraid to introduce my parents to my boyfriend. I says, well, why? She says, I'm just afraid they won't like him. I says, well, give them a try. She says, oh, they don't even like my husband. They're not going to like my boyfriend. It's like, oh, okay. But it's there. It's the point is that we do stupid things in the name of love, you know. But the thing is that we want to keep moving with our understanding of the way that all of these pieces of the puzzle work together. And if we get truthful with ourselves, we look at the things that are wonderful in our chart, and we use those things, that's great. And when we have problems, if we look and say, okay, I see what the conflict is in me, and we start working on it. It was like a Elijah Cummings saying, we have to get in good trouble. You know, it's like it comes to us, and we just have to ask ourselves, not why is this happening to me, but why is this happening for me? What is being given to me? None of this is easy. It's simple, but it isn't easy. It requires tremendous work to get the level of detachment that you can actually start growing for real, spiritually. And it always comes after you cross the ring of Saturn, which is you're no longer blaming somebody else or other things. I was born in the wrong family. You know, my parents treated me wrong, and that's why I'm this way. It's like you take what you got. It's like, and you say, okay, I put myself in, I don't know how I did it. You know, I'm not a genius on figuring this out, but I accept that I created it. And now let me see the gift that's in it and start unrolling things so that I can move forward. And that's how we start on this spiritual path for real, is when we, instead of being fearful, we become disciplined. Instead of being hateful or blaming, we just say, okay, I don't like what I've got. How can I get something better? It's like, it isn't to go steal it from somebody else. It's like to earn it. It's like, oh, okay. And that's how we build a better life. Now, we're going to take a lunch break, and we're going to be gone for an hour and a half. So have a good lunch, and we will be back here together at 1:30, and we'll pick up the thread with the notes. Okay? Thank you.